Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Good. How you
Good
see
evening.
all you
Yeah.
gentlemen made it? It's been a long week, but we got here. The Sabbath is here, or soon to be here, in a neighborhood near you. This week we're going to change things up a bit. We're going to talk about the Land Sabbath, the 7-year rest for the land, and health issues, healthy eating, and what maybe some of the consequences of not keeping God's law, namely the Land Sabbath, can be. So everybody sit back, enjoy the program, and here we go. Hey, I think that was the smoothest transition yet. I think I might keep my engineer around.
Smart decisions.
Yeah, buddy. Well, like again, glad everyone made it. Why don't you take us out? Take us out with a joke.
Okay, an engineer was crossing a road one day when a frog called out to him and said, "If you kiss me, I'll turn into a beautiful princess." So he bent over, picked up the frog, and put it in his pocket. Later, the frog cried out, "If you kiss me, I'll turn back into a princess. I'll stay with you for one entire week, and you can do anything you want." The engineer took the frog again, smiled, and put him back in his pocket. Later, the frog asked, "What is the matter? I've told you I'm a beautiful princess, and I'll stay with you for 1 week, do anything you want. Why won't you kiss me?" The engineer said, "Look, I'm an engineer. I don't have time for a girlfriend, but a talking frog, now that's cool."
All right.
That's a different kind of joke, isn't it?
He's got issues. I don't know about it.
By the way, I just want to mention in Deuteronomy 4:1 and 2, God says to not add or diminish from his law. And one of the things as we introduce the Land Sabbath is that we have to look at everything in the Bible and keep it in balance. Because if you diminish something by not teaching it, or if you add to by over focusing on it, often accurately, that's how a lot of error gets into religion, and sometimes even groups go off in one little picky little point and become some kind of weird cult. So we're going to try to look at a balance of things. But before we start, since the Land Sabbath is all about our bodies, we're going to go to Gary.
Yeah, okay. When there for a second when Ken said, "Jim, take us out," I thought I was on the Enterprise.
Jim Kirk, never mind.
Take us out.
I myself as a heroic captain.
Yeah.
Nobody else sees it.
We'll
Okay,
get you a red shirt.
I want to start us out by giving you some amazing facts about your body, God's creation. Now, except for your brain cells, 50 million of the cells in your body will have died and been replaced with others, all while I have been reading this first sentence. The adult heart beats about 40 million times a year. In 1 hour, the heart works hard enough to produce enough energy to raise almost 1 ton of weight 1 yard off the ground. The liver is often called the body's chemical factory. Scientists have counted 500 different liver functions. The central nervous system is connected to every part of the body by 43 pairs of nerves. 12 pairs go to and from the brain, and 31 go from the spinal cord. There are nearly 45 miles of nerves running throughout our bodies. Messages travel along the nerves as electrical impulses. The fastest they travel is about 248 miles per hour. In 1 square inch of skin, there are 4 yards of nerve fibers, 1,300 nerve cells, 100 sweat glands, 3 million cells, and 3 yards of blood vessels. Now, the point of all these facts is that this wonderful creation, this body that God created, is a wonderful, complex creation. It's like a machine. All of its parts, its organs, glands, muscles, and tissues must be in good working condition. Its electrical system, that is, its nervous system, must be carrying energy smoothly to all the areas. There must not be any short circuits. Finally, it must be fueled with the proper nutrition to keep it functioning, alive, and well. That is the foods that God has prescribed that we fuel it with.
And before we get to more discussion of the Land Sabbath, it just seems the human body, as Gary said, is so complex. And nutrition, they've discovered that many vitamins that are created artificially in labs, your body does not seem to be able to absorb. It's something about the way the molecules are configured. If they're part of a natural food source, the body can use it. And the point is that the land Sabbath and soil is the bedrock for good health. And eating things that are natural is good for you. But I want to start off by going to Isaiah 28. I'm going to start in verse 7. But there's a point to this these scriptures. Isaiah 28:7. And 28:7 says, "But they also have erred through wine and through strong drink, and are out of the way. The priests and the prophets have erred through strong drink. They have swallowed up of wine. They're out of the way through strong drink. They err in vision. They stumble in judgment." In other words, he's saying the religious leaders in Israel had no vision. They couldn't see the truth. And 2 Corinthians 4, Paul says there's still a veil over their face when the Old Testament is read. They don't understand that they don't see it. Going on to verse 9, whom shall he teach knowledge? Because this is the question. Who is going to really understand the depths of the Bible, the important things in the Bible, the things that God wants us to know? Who's going to understand them? Whom shall he make to understand doctrine? Them that are weaned from milk and drawn from the breast, those that have matured in their Bible knowledge. For precept must be on precept, precept upon precept, verse 10, line upon line, which of course is the theme title of this program, line upon line, here a little, there a little. Now what that means is that if you want to understand the Bible, you have to look at all parts of it. Nothing's off limits. The law, the wisdom books, that's Psalms and Proverbs and some of the other Psalm-type books like Song of Solomon, the minor prophets, the major prophets. Of course, the law is the first 5 books of the Old Testament. That's called the law, the books that Moses wrote. And then, of course, there's the Gospels, the writings of Paul, the general epistles, the book of Revelation. There are a lot of religious people who don't look at the entire Bible. They have only certain verses that they will cover. They build their doctrines only on certain verses, and other parts of the Bible and verses they avoid like the plague. Like, we would never read that because we can't explain it. And you have to be able to look at the entire Bible. It's one doctrine here, one doctrine there, one doctrine there, line upon line, line upon line. All that's important. And I want to go to verse. There's more that could be said about all that, how the Israelites had a bad attitude, so God says, hey, you're going to have to listen to people ruling over you who are babbling and talking in foreign languages. And, of course, they were conquered by the Babylonians. Verse 13, but the word from the Lord, or Jehovah, if you like the English version of that word, was upon them, precept upon precept, precept upon precept, line upon line, line upon line, here a little, there a little. And God said he did that so that certain people who were in a bad attitude would fall backward, be broken, snared, and taken. In other words, they get snared by false doctrines. They don't understand the truth. And sometimes cults come because people take one little verse And they spend 90-some% of their time messing with that one little verse, one little idea. They get carried away with it. It's all our whole church. We focus only on the place of safety. We focus only on not using musical instruments. We focus, certain names, and or even if it's something big, like we only focus on grace. Well, grace alone, if you just read the book of Romans, will mislead you, because Paul said, grace does not disannul the law. But the point I'm making is many churches miss the truth because they only look at certain things. Now, the point I want to make is, go ahead.
I just want to interrupt. Now that a lot of these mega churches, these super churches, they focus on only believe. I don't know what they want you to believe, but they focus on just about nothing. Showing up on Sunday, that's what they focus on. Because I heard. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Some of them focus on what I call happy talk. Positive
entertainment, yeah.
And, the Bible is so much more complicated than just, there are positive things like hope, but if that's all you have, or some they call the gospel the prosperity gospel. You give them money and God gives you money, and that's 99% of what they preach. Only those verses.
Right.
And that's, you can't, God's religion is just more complicated than that. Yeah. Although there are verses like that, but you can't. And the reason I'm mentioning all that, we're going to talk about what many would consider a fairly obscure minor law, the Land Sabbath. And while it is, granted, it's not the biggest thing in the Bible by any means, we believe everything in the Bible has some meaning that understanding it is not bad for you.
No, I'll fully admit I was a little skeptical at first about the subject, but when you think about the ramifications and how it affects, how much it affects our lives by not doing that, it's quite a bit bigger than I originally was giving it credit for. So I'm glad we're doing it.
Go ahead.
We come from the soil, and we will return to the soil. And in the meantime, the soil feeds us. What could be more important?
Yeah.
By the way, I'm going to jump ahead of my notes, and then we'll go back to Gary. I hope this is okay. I want to be sure and say it. When we were in Clarksville, Tennessee, one man who lived near us, named Andy Sanford, we went to his backyard to see his garden. He had what looked to me like 8 inches of thick, powdery, rich soil. It was black and rich and powdery and gooey, and it was fabulous soil. And everything he grew was 2 or 3 times bigger and richer and better taste than any other garden. So we asked him, well, how did you create such fabulous garden? He said, it's the soil. He used compost and the Land Sabbath. And on the Land Sabbath, he let it grow by itself and then just chop down all the vegetation that was left and just kind of bury it. But the land would rest 1 out of 7 years. And he created a soil that you almost had to see it. It was so soft. It was just unbelievable. Now, if that is, let's say, a product of, someone really managing his soil, what if the entire earth had soil like that?
Yeah, in its natural state. I've noticed that more and more people within our church even are concerned about what they eat, especially with Monsanto and the GMOs and the chemicals that are used and all of this artificial means. People are thinking more and more about trying to grow more of their own food in a natural way, and so the Land Sabbath is becoming a popular thing. I've heard more and more people talking about it. Let me just read the scripture here. It's Leviticus chapter 25, verses 2 through 7. This is the original word from God on the Land Sabbath. It says, speak to the Israelites and say to them, when you enter the land that I'm going to give you, the land itself must observe a Sabbath to the Lord. For 6 years sow your fields, and for 6 years prune your vineyards and gather their crops. But in the 7th year, the land is to have a Sabbath rest, a Sabbath to the Lord. Do not sow your fields or prune your vineyards. Do not reap what grows of itself, or harvest the grapes of your untended vines. The land is to have a year of rest. Whatever the land yields during the Sabbath year will be food for you, for yourself, for your servants, your maidservants, your hired worker, and temporary residents who live with you, as well as for your livestock and the wild animals in your land. Whatever the land produces may be eaten. That's Leviticus 25. The question of the land Sabbath is exactly what year is the seventh year? That's the question that I hear most. Now, some people say, well, you just take 1 year out of the seven, the last year out of seven, but where do you begin counting? And some people don't think that's important, and I'm sure that if they do give that land a rest at whatever the seventh year is, that it's beneficial to the land and beneficial to the crops. But I wonder if there's any way of computing exactly when that started. That would have been at Sinai, and if you could count to the seventh year and come up with a determination of exactly which year it is. Another thing I've heard too, when I say, well, a lot of people are just going to a seventh year, and their answer is, well, you don't just go to any seventh day in the week for the weekly Sabbath. It's a specific day. And they believe that that is going to be a specific year. I've tried to research it, and I haven't found a way to compute that yet, but I'm not going to give up.
I would think it's different for everyone. If I went out and bought land from somebody that I was going to farm, I would farm that for 6 years from the time I acquired the land, and then the seventh year do the rest. And I think that's probably how that would be done, because the land, changes hands, it changes ownership. So it would make sense to me that it would start whenever I personally did that.
Well, I think that would be a good practice. That would be a good way to go about it. But I would still like to know if there's any possible way to compute that.
Here's what I can tell you. The Jews couldn't own land in Europe for, I think, over like 1,000 years, because land was wealth and power, and they were anti-Semitic. So the Jews have been out of farming. Well, at least most of them have been out of farming until Israel was recreated in 1948. Now, so my thought is, if God wanted the land Sabbath, if it was that important that we knew exactly where it was, God would not have let the Jews lose sight of it with absolute certainty. But, here's the but. The Jews have gotten on a pattern. Whether they can prove it goes back to the days of Moses or not, they've gotten on a pattern. And I was shocked. This guy, Dr. Stanley, got his article off the internet. Apparently, they start at Rosh Hashanah, Feast of Trumpets. That's their kind of business New Year. And the last one was 2007 Rosh Hashanah. I assume that means the next one in Israel. Not that people in other lands necessarily have to follow Israel's pattern, but that means the next one for Israel would be Rosh Hashanah Trumpets 2014. Wouldn't that be correct? 7 years? Or maybe or would it have been the previous year? Anyway, it doesn't matter, but I just thought I'd share that.
A couple of weeks back, May 10th, when we had our service in Novi, Michigan there was a fellow there who told me that he has a group of people. I don't think they're an organized church, but he said they had figured it out, and they had a foolproof means way of figuring it, and he told me that it was this year, 2014.
But I say Jews in Israel, that's when they're doing it. I'm not so sure that they would even say they are certain of it, but they started something when they got back to Israel. But they don't all do it. Only the more religious farmers do it, and it's complicated. I got a big article, but at least the ones who do it, that's the pattern that they've got going. 2007 was the last one, so I guess this fall is the next one coming up. Or is it? Whatever the details are, and I may not know that correctly. Okay, let's see, Dave. You're going to cover Leviticus 26, right?
All right, let me get some spectacles on here. 26 and verse 34. Then the land will enjoy its Sabbath years all the time that it lies desolate, and you are in the country of your enemies, then the land will rest and enjoy its Sabbaths. So he's promising blessings in the land if you do what you're supposed to do. And if you go up to 43, same chapter, Leviticus 26 and 43, for the land will be deserted by them and will enjoy its Sabbaths while it lies desolate without them. They will pay for their sins because they have rejected my laws and abhorred my decrees. So if you reject God's laws and you don't follow his laws, your land will suffer for that. I also think that there's more to it than that. I think that God will withhold rain and things like this, which also will damage your land if you do not obey his laws.
And
I think that's right.
I do, and if you take a look around the world, there are places that are, for centuries and centuries, have not obeyed God, and you can tell. Look at their lands, and they're pretty desolate.
That's right. God withholds his blessings of rain and sunshine when proper, and even the winter and the weather that you have in the wintertime is beneficial to the land.
Absolutely. But well, we don't really have winter down here, but I imagine up north it makes a big difference.
they say snow is really good for the farmers in the Midwest. It brings nitrogen to the soil. By the way, I talked to a couple old farmers. Now this is Missouri, but I believe the whole Midwest is similar. They said up until the early 1900s, of course, America was newer land than the rest of the world, and we haven't worn it out yet. But much of the farmland got wore out. They wore the land out, and they had to keep, opening new acreage for farming because they were wearing the land out. Then they discovered crop rotation, and they also just had to let some of the land rest, rejuvenate. In other words, they were forced to do some land Sabbath, and then later the government would tell them to lay out certain parts of their land for a year to protect farm prices. Oddly enough, most of America's farm history, unlike most of the world, most of America's farm problems have been overproduction. Like if you produce too much wheat, cotton, soybeans, corn, the price goes too low and the farmers don't make enough profit. So they in the ag department, it's complicated. They got all these laws and rules where ag department tells farmers how much land and different crops so to keep the prices up. But the farmers said in the last couple of years, especially this year, there are very few restrictions of that sort. Agricultural prices are up in everything. Rice, sugar, corn, and of course ethanol really kicks up our corn prices because we're burning it in our fuel tank like idiots. But then he said, something came along. Agri-science got better and better. The chemicals are very strong. They'll even bleach your hand. They got these super strong chemicals and GMO seeds where they have really upped production. Corn is taller than ever. And I guess my question would be, maybe the world has found, at least American agriculture, through chemistry and genetically modified seeds, to up agricultural production, but is it really good for our health?
No, they're squeezing every last bit out of the land and trying to replace it with what they think will make everything grow and still give us nutrition. But that's the problem. It's what they think. There's things that we claim to know a lot about nutrition and farming, and we learn new things every day. I mean, how many times have you been told not to eat this and not to eat that, and then 2 or 3 years later, oh, yeah, that's good for you. The stuff we told you to eat instead will kill you. They took coconut oil out of our popcorn, and now they're telling us it's good for Alzheimer's. So, and then I don't even know what they replaced it with, even if it's real butter or what. But I mean, they do this to us all the time, and they don't know as much as they claim to know. But they're playing, in a sense, they're playing God with our by genetically modifying things to get more yield out of it. They want the biggest bang for the buck out of the ground and out of the seeds, because it costs money. Fuel prices go up. They don't just pay more to till that land. They got to squeeze it out of somewhere else. So they squeeze it out of yields. They get it more. They do better with pesticides. They breed corn to be pest resistant. And if you don't think this stuff doesn't affect you, just because they say it doesn't mean that they're right.
They say that that's a way of starving people. I've heard that referred to as empty food. It's tangible, and you have it, and you can put it in your mouth and swallow it, and it feels like there's something there, because there's no nutrition to it. The fellow that I was reading that article, that's how he referred to a loaf of white bread. He said it's empty food. There's nothing in it. It's tangible. Yeah. You can see it, but there's nothing there.
Yeah, and I'm going with that claim too. That's why I'm so fat, because I just got to eat more to try and get my nutrition. I'm going with that one.
They bleach everything as well.
Yeah.
If you really think about it, you grab a can of almonds that are already shelled, and as you eat them, if you think about it, you can almost taste like they've had something done to them, something chemical done to them, and they bleach everything. That can't be healthy.
We saw a guy on TV, and he was saying that the less processed food you eat, the more raw, natural food, the better. Obviously, perfect food without, perfect farming is probably hard to get, but it does make sense. More raw vegetables and fruits and less processed foods where they put hydrogenated. Well, I'm not sure everywhere. They are trying to do better on some of that stuff, but still, things like margarine, that's one of the worst foods you can get. And I think many of these, when you go to the movie theaters, I believe that's artificial butter they're putting on that stuff.
That is artificial butter, and a lot of that stuff is made with lard product. And the liquid cheeses are lard product. So things that you think you're getting, you don't always know what it is. And it's like L-cysteine. The amino acid L-cysteine is made from duck and chicken feathers as a rule. But I called one of the manufacturers, and they told me that they put whatever L-cysteine is on the market. And I said, do you use human hair? And she took a breath, and she said, yes, sir, sometimes we buy human hair. They buy it from the Far East. There's lots of cults and religions and stuff in the Far East where they don't have any body hair. They found a way to sell it to us, and we eat it. It goes in breads, it goes in bagels, it goes in vitamins.
Yeah, you're crazy.
Sue Ellen one time did it. I can't remember what she was doing it for, but she studied margarine, the difference in butter, and she found out that margarine is only one chemical component away from plastic.
Yeah, it's bad for you. More natural, the better. And people might say, well, what's the spiritual connection here? I think it's not the most important thing in the Bible, but the reasons Israel went into exile were, of course, idolatry and putting their babies, sacrificing their babies to Baal, breaking the Sabbath, and a general bad attitude and violence, but also breaking the Land Sabbath. And because your body is the temple that the Spirit inhabits, and the only way to keep the body healthy is to have healthy soil and healthy crops. By the way, I don't want anyone to think that what I said was a total criticism of agri-science. I'm sure they do wonderful things, and they're smart people learning brilliant stuff. But if I were in charge, I would do like Andy Sanford did. Composting and land Sabbaths would be the best way to build great farms.
Barnyard fertilizer.
Right. Yep. The issue becomes it's like anything else in business. When one person does it, when one person is if they're gonna say, well, we're gonna use GMOs, we're gonna genetically enhance our corn, and we're gonna yield 30% more than the rest of them. then all of a sudden he can charge the same price that the rest of them can charge. All of a sudden he's making money, and he can afford to start putting these other guys out of business by buying up land. So if you don't keep up with that guy, I mean, that's why everybody's doing it. Now you can't. I mean, I don't even think you can buy other than through heirloom seed companies. You can't go into a store and buy a seed to plant in your garden or in your field in your farm on your farm that's not genetically enhanced.
You know, it's just kind of a dual thought here. God loves us. He wants us to do what's right, the best for us. He wants us to have a clean spirit, a clean mind, and a clean body. So in order to do that, we're made from dirt, which is kind of a thought. But he teaches us how to clean the dirt that we feed ourselves with so that our bodies can be clean and operate better, because we are going to return back to dust.
That's right.
You know, there's just kind of a duality there.
We just had one of our watchers commented. She said one of the first nutritionists said wheat has says 30 plus nutrients in it. So they processed it, which obviously pulls a lot of the nutrients out of it, and then they put 8 of the nutrients back in that they took out through processing, and now they call it enriched. It's still less than what it has naturally, but because they put out what they put back in what they took out, all of a sudden they enriched it. They're the ones who broke it, but now they're telling you how good it is. It's like it's pretty much, yeah. I don't want to get too far off, so go ahead.
You
I'm
all
sorry.
hear that story about how in Europe, for a while, the peasants were healthier than the aristocrats, because the aristocrats had white bread, and the regular people had to just eat the regular whole wheat brown bread. Turned out the poor people were blessed. In other words, sometimes too much wealth, it can be, let's face it can be bad for you. But here's an interesting one. A guy calculated the land Sabbaths that were missed when Israel spent their 70 years in captivity, and it actually totaled the land. Well, no, it's the 70 years that Israel lied without any farming, like barren, equaled the number of land Sabbaths at 430 that would have been celebrated. So actually, it did come to pass, the period between the first and second temple, when Judah went into exile. The land got all the Sabbaths that they didn't give it during that time period.
Well, that's interesting.
And then they came back out of captivity. Let me tell my middle joke. This is called Long Sermon. Benny, a pastor known for his lengthy sermons, noticed Ralph get up and leave during the sermon. He returned just before the conclusion sermon. Afterwards, Benny asked Ralph, why did he leave? And Benny said, his reply was, to get a haircut. That's what Ralph said, to get a haircut. But Benny said, that's the pastor, well, why didn't you do that before the service? Because Ralph said, I didn't need one then.
That was good.
You know what they say, what does it mean when a pastor looks at his watch during a long sermon?
Nothing.
Nothing.
What scripture was it that talked about the king that wanted several of the Hebrew slaves to be servants in his home, and he decreed that they should eat what he was eating so that they would be healthy and
Daniel 1.
Yeah.
Daniel
yeah.
1.
And they asked if they could eat their own diet, which I'm sure was a biblical diet. And when they did, their continence and their health became even greater than the king's.
Wasn't that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? Yep.
Yeah. They ate vegetables. Apparently, they didn't drink the wine and didn't eat all those exotic meats like squirrel meat and probably
Rodents.
things in the bottom of the sea, shellfish. And sometimes the rich, decadent people, their health can go down faster because of the decadent diet. And maybe America, our problem is too much food and maybe too much decadent food.
Yeah, that's true.
Not enough. We had too much or too many choices. And let's face it, I mean, everybody loves to eat. By the way, I was listening to one of our local talk show hosts, and she brought up something that I never knew, at least now according to her, and she was a female athlete and a beauty contestant many years ago. She says 43% of all female athletes present time have eating disorders. And food has become and they get, in other words, too much food has got them all screwed up.
Yeah. Something else, I don't know, I don't want, like I said, I don't want to get too far off, but there's a lot of allergies that I've never heard of in my life till recent times. Peanuts and, I mean, just all kinds of, someone's allergic to onions and all kinds of things that I have never heard of. What's the latest one is gluten. Gluten, you find in the grains that people, my cousin, I mean, she almost died from it, and she has to have a very specific diet that doesn't include any gluten at all, or else she gets violently ill. I mean, that stuff never existed before that I know of.
Why do you think that's happening now?
Obviously, because the land is not being rested, and they're just genetically enhancing everything and squeezing every last drop out of that acreage that they can get.
And I believe if you look at the Middle East, the land over there looks horrible. And at one time, the Fertile Crescent was some of the best land in the world. I think at least one of the problems is they've overused it. All these thousands of years, they never gave it Land Sabbath. And according to some articles, if you let the land rest, weeds come up and bring new chemicals to the surface. And then when you cut down all the stuff that grew wild and plowed under, all that material enriches the soil, and then it takes 6 years to break down. That's what Andy told us, the guy I told you about. It takes 6 years to break down, and then you replenish it on the 7th year, and then that cycle with a little natural fertilizer keeps making your soil better and better.
Makes sense.
I remember I was talking to a fellow from East Kentucky one time, and he said when he was growing up in Kentucky, they didn't have cholesterol. They'd never heard of it. He said if we would have had it, we'd have fried it up and made gravy with it.
That sounds like a guy from Kentucky.
Just remember, from their version, moonshine is good for your health. It clears the brain.
Oh, man.
I know that my grandmother, her doctor told her to smoke. That would keep her nerves calm. So she started smoking because the doctor told her to.
Wow.
How do you get a prescription for that? You take that to the. Can you get so she get what is that prescription? Could the insurance cover part of that?
Well, I don't know.
It's $6 a pack. It's $6 a pack now.
We're talking 100 years ago, so.
Yeah. All right. What else do we want to cover? Any other biblical references that we have laid out here?
Well, James asked me to read this one scripture, and I'm going to read it and let him explain it. It was 2 Timothy 2, verses 14 and 15. Beginning in verse 14, it says, "Remind them of these things, changing them before the Lord, not to strive about words to no profit, to the ruin of the hearers. Be diligent to present yourself approved to God, a worker who does not need to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of the truth."
Yeah, my thought was one thing line upon line should help us all do, so that all of us can become workmen, like mature people who really know, like a plumber who really knows all that plumbing stuff, workmen who really know the Bible. And by the way, Timothy, the Bible he knew, of course, was the Old Testament. So all the Bible is useful. We should know all the Bible, even including the Land Sabbath, but other things when applied properly. I realize that this is not a theocracy, America, so nobody can talk about trying to force people to keep the Land Sabbath or anything of that nature. But I believe that everything God did was good. And if they, kept the soil in good shape, we'd have less droughts and we'd be healthier.
Yep. Anytime you go back and look at God's word, if you keep it, sometimes it's a struggle at first, and I mean it's a struggle, even not at first, but the more you do keep His laws and His statutes and do what He puts out for us, the happier and the better off you end up being. You may not see it immediately, but over a short period of time, you will start to see it. You'll start to realize the benefits and the reasons that He laid out His law the way He did.
I remember my grandfather would have us, at least several times, he would talk to the guy in the cattle yards. And we'd take a pickup truck to the cattle yards and we would shovel what's on the bottom of the cattle yard. You know what that is.
Barnyard
Bring it home and plow it into the garden. Needless to say, as 10, 11-year-old kids, I was not all that happy about it, but it was the right thing to do.
It worked, yeah.
Absolutely. Now they experiment with all kinds of weird stuff to fertilize farms now. You don't even want to know what they spray on some of them.
Okay, and for our listeners, I do have this list, unabridged list, and this is right from Leviticus 11, and Ken's going to be getting this onto online for everybody so they can copy it if they like to have it. It's just a good thing to have.
Yeah, I'll post the clean meats list on our Facebook fan page. And also, if you we would like to have a Q&A, a question and answer program. So anybody listening wants to shoot me an email at landuponline2810@gmail.com. And we'll get your questions, and then we'll pick one program, and we'll announce it, and we'll answer everybody's questions to the best of our ability. And so get as many as you can in. If we have more than enough to get on one program, we'll split it up and maybe have two. So we'd like to do a Q&A, question and answer session.
That was landuponline2810
at gmail.com. Yep. Absolutely. So we here, gentlemen. It is It's 9:43. We've gone another 45 minutes almost. I think we'll probably end it here unless anyone has something else they'd want to add here.
Happy future Pentecost next week. Happy
yes.
Pentecost.
And I'll let everybody know through the G Plus or the Facebook page, all of our listeners. Whether or not we're going to have one at this point, we're not sure. We may not have, but we may not have enough people available from all the traveling that everybody has to do. So, but I will let you know. Right now, the plan is to continue next week and have a program. So, unless something falls through, we're going to try and have one. All right. All right. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night. Good luck.
Good night, everybody.